Hi, Claudia here from Create with Claudia, and today I am so excited about what I'm going to show you. It's a huge thank you to all of my subscribers and future subscribers. It's a free quilt pattern that I designed when I hit 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, and it was such a milestone for me. I was so excited about it, and I just had to design a free quilt for it. It's a little mini. Here it is. It's called Every Which Way, and hopefully you can see the whole thing. All the arrows going every which way. I absolutely love it. Like I said, it's a little mini. It's 28 by 24. And I even made this other mini, a mini of the mini, in red and white. So there's another option for you. And I'm going to show you how to make it today. And before I do that, I do, again, want to thank everybody for subscribing. I really appreciate it. It was something that I had, it was a goal of mine for a long time. And when I hit it, I was doing a little happy dance around the house. That did not get filmed. So anyway, I hope you stay tuned. I hope you like the pattern. You can find all of the information as well as the downloadable PDF on my website, www.createwithclaudia.com. And I'd love it if you hit the subscribe button. I always love new subscribers. Thank you so much. And I'm on social media at Create with Claudia. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where I post things pretty much daily. So thank you so much for watching. And again, thank you so much for helping me hit 10,000 subscribers on YouTube. And enjoy the video. Okay, so we're ready to start this little mini quilt. I'm so excited to show this to you. I recommended it at the beginning of the video, and I recommend it again. Go to my website to download the pattern. That way you get all of the cutting instructions, but I will be going over them today. So these are the fabrics I'm using today. A little bit of a rainbow effect. I love those. They're so pretty. And this is what you're going to need. And let me tell you a little bit about the quilt. The quilt, when it's finished, measures 28 by 24. And each square is 2.5 inches, the ones you're going to sew together. So it's a nice little mini quilt. It comes together really quickly. The only not problem, but the thing that takes the longest is making those half square triangles for the arrows. So these are the fabrics I'm using, and I'm going to tell you what you're going to need and how much of it. For the background, and in this case today I'm going to be using some low volume fabrics. For the background, you're going to need the following. You're going to need 87 squares that are cut 2.5 inches square. And the other cut you're going to need out of your background fabric, you're going to need 20 squares of the background fabric, and they're going to be cut 3.25 inches, and those are for your half square triangles. So that's what you need from your background fabric. And now for the fun part, the arrow fabric. And this is cutting instructions if you're making every arrow a different color. This is fabric A, is going to be this pink. And from fabric A, you need 1 square cut 3.25 inches, and that's it. From fabric B, which is this blue in this case, you need 6 squares cut 2.5 inches. And then you need 2 squares cut 3.25 inches. And that's fabric B. From fabric C, you're going to need the following. 4 squares cut 2.5 inches and 2 squares cut 3.25 inches. From fabric D, which is this gorgeous lime green. I love this. This really pops to me. And this is fabric D. You're going to need the following. 1 square cut 3.25 inches. From fabric E, you're going to need 3 squares cut 2.5 inches and 1 square cut 3.25 inches. That's fabric E. From fabric F, another lime green, a little bit lighter this time, and this is fabric F, you'll need 1 square cut 3.25 inches. From fabric G, which is this blue with swirls on it, that's fabric G. 4 squares cut 2.5 inches and 2 squares cut 3.25 inches. From fabric H, this purple, this is fabric H. You're going to need 8 squares cut 2.5 inches and 2 squares cut 3.25 inches. From fabric I, another purple, dark purple, you're going to need 8 squares cut 2.5 inches and 2 squares cut 3.25 inches. From fabric J, which is this really pretty turquoise blue, this is fabric J, you only need 1 square cut 3.25 inches. From K, you're going to need 6 squares cut 2.5 inches and 2 squares cut 3.25 inches. From L, you need 1 square cut 3.25 inches. And last but not least is this green, and this is M as in Mary. And from that, you need 2 squares cut 2.5 inches and 2 squares cut 3.25 inches. So that's M. So you need 2 that are cut 2.5 inches and 2 that are cut 3.25 inches. So that's your fabric. Now, if you decide to go with the arrows all one color, let's say, just for sake for the video, let's say you're going to do all orange, you're going to need the following cuts. You're going to need 20 squares. This is for the arrows. So if you're making orange arrows, you need 20 squares cut 3.25 inches, and then 41 squares cut 2.5 inches. And that's if you want all the arrows in one color. Okay? So the first thing we need to do is make all of our half square triangles. But the half square triangle is really easy, and it's a unit that's found in almost every single quilt you can find. So you're going to need for this, you're going to need your 3.25 inch squares. You're going to need your background, which is this beige, and then your arrow squares. And you're going to pair them up, one background and one of the arrow squares. And what you need to do, because you're going to need to get 2 out of this, is you're going to need to draw a line diagonal from corner to corner. And I'm going to make it nice and dark so you can see it. All right, so there's your line. That's going to be your sewing guide. You're going to sew down 1/4 inch along each side of that line. Don't sew on that line. That's going to be a cutting line later. So then you're going to take your arrow fabric. You're going to put this on top, line them up right sides facing. It's kind of hard to see on the beige, but right sides of the fabric are facing. All right, and then you're going to sew 1/4 inch, scant 1/4 inch down each side of that line. So I'm going to go do that, and I will be right back. Okay, so here we are. There's my square. You can see my 2 stitch lines along the line I drew, and we're going to cut now along that line. I normally, just as a heads up, I wouldn't normally use black thread when sewing, but I wanted you guys to be able to see how I stitch along that line. But what we're going to do is take our rotary cutter and cut along this drawn line and split it in 2. And this is easy to do. Whoop. That's it. So you're going to fold these open, and you're going to press, and I usually press to the darker fabric. And I will be right back, because the last thing we need to do to get these ready and to lay out this quilt is to trim these down to 2.5 inches. So I will do that in a minute. I'm just going to go press these. Okay, so these are now pressed. They look nice and crisp. And now all I need to do is trim them down to get ready to lay out the quilt and sew the quilt top together. So to do that, I need a 2.5 inch square. Like we cut the smaller one piece of fabric down to 2.5 inches. So now we need to trim this one down to 2.5 inches. And I still use this great little ruler I have. And it has, I don't know if you can see it, has that diagonal line, which is really nice. And that's what I line up with this diagonal line. And then you just find your points, your measurements that you're going to need. So for 2.5 inches, the first thing I do on the one side is sort of square it off. Okay, so now you have that nice sharp point, and that's going to be your point that you measure your 2.5 inches from. So I flip that around. I find where this little corner joins that diagonal line. There's your 2.5 inch marker. Hopefully you can see it right here. You're going to line that up on that corner. Make sure the fabric is lined up on that measurement, and in the middle. That gives you that nice half square triangle. And then you're going to cut off that edge. All right, So there you go. There's your half square triangle, cut 2.5 inches. So we would go ahead and do that with all of the arrow points. For any squares that you have 3.25 inches, you're just going to pair them up and make your half square triangles. And now we're ready to lay out this quilt and sew it together. Okay, so we're all ready to lay out this quilt. Now I've taken away my cutting board. I was hoping this tabletop would be big enough to lay this out, but I think I'm going to have to lay it down on the floor. I took the liberty of already preparing all of my half square triangles, and you can see how they're all labeled. This, by the way, is my pattern that you can download for free. It's the layout, and it has every corresponding, there's a letter A, so that's where my letter A arrow would go. Each one has a letter marked on it I hope pretty clearly for everybody to lay out. If it doesn't have a letter, and it's just a square, that would be then one of the background squares. Okay, so here are all the squares on the floor laid out in the way I want to sew them. You can see the pattern, and I laid my pattern down as my directions. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing. So I will start at the top left, which is that corner pink and off-white square, and I'm going to sew each row together. And then I'll show you how that looks, and then I'll show you how we piece the top together. I highly recommend, because you want to stay organized, sew each row individually, and then sew each row together, and check all the time, sort of compare it to your pattern. I can't tell you how many times when I first did this pattern, I used my seam ripper because I had one of the triangles going the wrong way. Okay, so now I've sewn all the individual squares into the rows, as you can see on the floor, and now I'm ready to piece each row together, and then the quilt top will be done. Okay, so here it is all sewn together, my beautiful celebration quilt. I'm so happy with it. This is of course just the top, still lots of little fuzzies on it I'm going to get rid of, and now I'm going to quilt it. You can see I tried to get really sharp points. Some of them are better than others. We won't look too closely. I know everybody knows how that is. Anyway, because it's sort of a grid pattern, I'll probably, like the other ones, just quilt it in the ditch. That's an easy, quick way to quilt it. Gets it done in almost no time. You can make this in an afternoon if you wanted to. Okay, I'm back with the finished quilt, and I am so excited with the way it turned out. I absolutely love it. Here it is. Hopefully you can see it. That is the finished quilt, and I'll have a picture of it at the end as well. It's such a happy quilt, especially for me, and it's such a thank you to everybody that subscribed to my channel. I do hope you make it. It's like a little modern mini quilt. Here's the first version I did, and this is solids with a white background. And then finally I did a mini of the mini modern quilt, and what I did in this one is I just did 2-inch squares instead of 2.5-inch squares, and it just made it a nice little piece. I'm not sure where I'm going to hang that yet, but I love the colors, and this time I did a pattern background, and then the arrows were one solid color, and I did give you those directions. Don't forget you can go to my website, createwithclaudia.com, where you can find all of my patterns, including this latest one. And I also hope you subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I'm on social media at Create with Claudia, where you can find all sorts of interesting projects that I post. I share things from other people as well. So thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for subscribing and help me get to that first goal of 10,000 subscribers. Have a great day.